Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. I can't begin to tell you how overwhelmed that I am, as well as the panelists, with the amount of support that has been given to us to be able to do this and to introduce this topic to you. Reintroduction to some and introduction for others. I have to tell you, when I was a Los Angeles police officer and out there in the field at 3 o'clock in the morning, watching the things that I was watching, I often wondered, does anybody really know and understanding what's going on? Fast forward, we are really explaining this process, and there is a lot of progress, but we got to continue the fight. So let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Stephany Powell. I'm a 30-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. I retired as a sergeant in charge of a vice unit, and due to that experience, I have become a human trafficking advocate within the scope of legislative policy, education and awareness, as well as a nonprofit executive. I am currently a consultant and adjunct lecturer at the University of Southern California. On behalf of the Jensen Project and the National Center for Sexual Exploitation and our partners at Rights for Girls, I am honored to welcome you to today's conversation. Before we start, I think it's important for all of us to have an idea of what human trafficking is. Again, for some of you, this is what you do, and you know this frontward and backward. But there are actually people that are joining us for the first time. So as a result of that, I'm going to cover Human Trafficking 101. So what is human trafficking? And so many people have asked this question, or they have an idea of what it is. But for the sake of this conversation, so that we're on the same page, I'm going to give you the actual definition of it. So human trafficking is the exploitation of people through force, fraud, and coercion for the purposes of labor or commercial sex. It's one of the fastest growing criminal trades in the world. When we talk about coercion, and that becomes pretty difficult for people to understand, and we've been seeing that in the current, how do I say, conversations as it pertains to P. Diddy or R. Kelly or some of the others. But to understand coercion, coercion to enter the sex trade can be the result of vulnerabilities, including homelessness, poverty, and substance abuse. It can also include vulnerabilities such as the systems in which we're going to be talking about today. And those systems, including the juvenile justice system and conditions of the foster care system, as well as our educational system. Today, we are going to turn our attention to the issues that disproportionately impact Black women and girls here in the United States. So consider the following from our partners at Rights for Girls. Yasmin, I want to give you a shout out, as well as a 2020 study done by the Congressional Black Caucus. So listen to these stats. Black women and girls make up at least 40% of sex trafficking victims in the United States, despite the fact that we make up 13% of the US population. Now, I want you to sit with that for just a second because I need to repeat it. Black women and girls make up at least 40% of sex trafficking victims in the United States, despite making up 13% of the US population. However, this does not negate the fact that it also happens to men and boys as well. Now listen to this stat. 57.7% of all juvenile arrests for prostitution are Black children, which is incredibly disturbing. Children are victims. They can never consent. In Los Angeles County, a staggering 92% of Black girls in the juvenile justice system are identified as sex trafficking victims. And these are Black sex trafficking victims. And 62% of them came from the foster care system. So what I'm saying is, again, a staggering 92% of girls in the juvenile justice system who identified as sex trafficking victims are Black. 62% of them came from the foster care system. Disturbingly, research has shown that traffickers deliberately target Black girls believing that they will receive less severe legal consequences if caught. For some of you, that just sounds incredible. That can't happen. Well, I can tell you right now, I am part of a trial where that is happening. But the data alone doesn't tell the whole story. Black women and girls are also subject to adultification bias, a proven societal perception that Black girls are older and thus more sexualized than their white peers. This bias robs them of the protection and the services that they deserve. And you're going to hear about that later. This adultification bias has even played out in our legislative process. Last year, the California legislators determined that soliciting a 16 and 17-year-olds for prostitution should not be a felony. Thankfully, partners such as Rights for Girls, along with Representative Maggie Krul and Senator Shannon Grove, as well as other advocates and survivor leaders that were on the ground. And those survivors really played a pivotal part because as a result, it turned the tide and determined that this should not stand. After a very difficult and, trust me, grueling legislative session, Governor Newsom just signed AB 379 yesterday, which finally makes it a felony to buy a 16 and 17-year-olds in the state of California. So that includes any minor under the age of 18. It's now a felony in California. So as you can see, these systematic dynamics are so important to our conversation, not only today, but it needs to be a continuous discussion. The harm done to Black women and girls is not abstract. It is now my privilege to welcome Congressman Jonathan Jackson, who represents Illinois' 1st District, a lifelong advocate for justice and equality. He continues a powerful legacy of civil rights leadership and is a strong voice for communities impacted by systemic injustice, including the scourge of sex trafficking. Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Powell. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for the work, your leadership, and thank you to the survivors and those that are on this and do this noble and great work. Let me just say, I've got some prepared remarks, but I just want to speak from my heart on this matter of the most shocking thing that has happened to me and coming into the United States Congress when people look at a representative in my community over here, somewhere between a minister, a counselor, problem solver. People will come at you all kinds of ways to get some solutions. But the women that I've gotten to know on a very personal level that feel as if they can confide in you, the most shocking thing that I experienced since becoming a congressman is people that would tell me about sexual assault. That is the one thing I had no idea about as a man I've grown up with my mother, my father, a very protective environment. And so it was just in the top 1,000 things I could not have imagined that there was this much pain and suffering in our communities, between the overcrowding of residences, between the lack of work, between substance abuse, between the high mobility rate of transferring children around, children getting lost, and then those children that are totally disconnected from their families and are thrown into these state institutions and systems. I had no idea. And then to go and see the people that, I don't talk about it, that profit, that look at adopting children once they retire to have a house full of children to supplement their income. I had no idea, Dr. Powell. So I thank you all for this work. And when you cite those numbers, I start seeing faces, these precious children that have gone and changed. As it ties into today, when I looked at the news and saw the horrific murder of the couple in front of their child down in Arkansas, I couldn't help but think about that. At 28-year-old young man, I would call him a child, but he's a young man, but he's the age of my children. What could have gotten into that young man's mind to do something so vicious and so hateful? This past weekend, I was in Charleston, South Carolina. I went to the Mother Emanuel Church and thought of the young Dylan Ruth and thought about, but the media is complicit in this when the media doesn't want to call it what it is. What we saw down there in Arkansas today is a hate crime. I've not seen one news outlet calling it a hate crime. I'm issuing a statement this afternoon on that. Uh, why would someone do something so cruel? And that ties into the profiting and the ignoring of our young daughters, turning the other way, saying you have a blind eye. It's not a blind eye. It's willful. It's malicious. It's meaning you don't value their precious life. And there's a long history of this from Phyllis Wheatley, a young girl that was abducted and kidnapped, all the way to the present day. So you have my commitment. I am fighting hard for the reauthorization of the Frederick Douglass on the Trafficking Act. I see this trafficking. I'm a huge supporter. Congressman Ro Khanna, we pushed that out on release the tapes of Jeff Epstein. Why? Because it has to deal with rich versus poor, male versus female. These men at the top of the society, former U.S. presidents, current U.S. presidents, the Kingdom of England, all tied into this sex trafficking. I know the young Black girls are getting it 3X, 4X, but now is the time for us to push to put something in there. I've reached out to a congressional Republican colleague of mine to see if he will co-sponsor with me this piece of legislation specifically entitled for young Black girls, because that's where the most pain is at the time. There's all pain, but because of the volume of it. But I want to follow your lead. I let women lead and I follow. Tell me how I can best be supportive. I'm not saying I'm an expert on this. And as I shared with you in conclusion, it was the most hurtful, painful thing I have first experienced in the United States Congress. I'm sitting at a restaurant and I'm crying because somebody's telling me, Jonathan, you didn't know I was homeless when we were in high school. Jonathan, you didn't know I had been sexually molested. Jonathan, my daughter is a product of my husband having raped me. I mean, my mouth is just dropping. I can tear up now thinking about it. So, whatever I can do, let me know. And I want to make a commitment to bringing more men into this conversation. This is not a female conversation, it's female led, but this is a family conversation. And I want to bring more men, more fathers involved so that I know there's got to be many more men with my experience that just didn't know. I asked one young lady, she was telling me about the amount of abuse that happens. And she says, I'm like, what are you saying? She said, oh, I think the number was 2 out of 5 or something of women that have experienced some abuse. And I thought that number was incredulous because I said, well, where are they? Like, I don't know guys like that. And she looked me in the eye and she says, they're all around you. And so I can't even imagine that the guys that I know have had this sort of interaction, but it's a public health crisis. So I'm committed to it. I want to prioritize it and let me know what more I can do. And thank you. And I'd like to see your remarks, comments, so I can do more and do my part with it. Thank you so much.
Ooh, Congressman, let me tell you, you hit it right on the nose. Man, I mean, kudos to you standing up. We do need to bring more men to the movement. And you're absolutely right. In having conversation with men, they will often say they did not know, right? And so, and I get it. That's where the education piece comes in. That's what drives us to do what we're doing today. And we need your support. We also need for you to bring your colleagues with you. Um, because there's a lot of education that needs to be done. There's a lot of policy that needs to be changed. And it's only then and when that happens that we could really put a dent into this thing. So I just thank you so very much for being here with us today. And I want the audience to know he volunteered to be here. He wanted to be here. So I just thank you so very much. And so with that, we're now going to continue with our fabulous speakers that I have had the privilege to know. I'm really excited. And I hope that I was not on mute when I was giving kudos to the Congressman. Was I on mute? Okay, thank you. I know you. I know you guys don't want to hear all that again. I don't even know if I could say it all again because it was coming from the heart. So this also comes from the heart. I want to introduce you guys to four incredible women that I have the privilege to know, that I have been in the fight with trafficking. Oh my God, since probably 2013. And so they are so committed, and they're going to be able to really unpack the consequences of trafficking on the Black community. So Dr. Tracey Sylvester is a board certified gynecological surgeon with over 25 years at Kaiser Permanente, Los Angeles, specializing in minimally invasive and robotic surgery for complex pelvic conditions. A passionate advocate and speaker, she brings vital awareness to the gynecological trauma and long-term health consequences faced by survivors of human sex trafficking. Next, we have the fabulous Brenda Myers-Powell, who is the CEO and founder of Ernestine's Daughter, a former member of the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking and author of Leaving Breezy Street. She has 25 years of experience as a survivor leader in this work. And then we have Melanie Thompson. Melanie, wait till you hear from her. She's incredible. They all are, but she's so incredible. Look, I'm gonna call her the baby of the group because the rest of us, we're a little older. So she's not a baby, but she's incredible. She is a survivor of sex trafficking and prostitution and is separately, and that's why this is so important, because there's so much more to all of them than them being survivors. So separately, she is a speaker, an activist, and international leader, bringing over 16 years of experience in the fight to end prostitution and commercial sexual exploitation. Last but not least, we have the Audrey Morrissey. She is the executive director, and I know a lot of you guys have heard this that are in the field of human trafficking. She is the executive director of My Life, My Choice in Boston, Massachusetts. She also sits on the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking and has over 22 years of experience working to end human trafficking. And so with that, we are going to begin with Dr. Sylvester. Dr. Sylvester, we're going to begin with you, and I have a question for you. And I know there are a lot of people who are asking the same question, and it's something that we don't normally talk about. So what do you think why do you think it's important for us to talk about the gynecological aspect of human trafficking?
Yes, so thank you, Dr. Powell, and thank you for having me as part of this important conversation today. It's important to really understand the complexities of the harm that's done by human trafficking. This is a complex subject. with so many areas that impact the victims. I think in order to really tackle the problem, we have to look at it from every side, from every angle. We have to mobilize as many resources as possible. And that includes talking about the difficult things to say, the hard things to talk about, what this is actually doing on a medical level to the body. I think we don't have room anymore to let things sort of be in the dark corners. We have to shine the light onto all the areas of human trafficking, human sex trafficking, and how we can best protect our women and girls.
Man, I love how you said that we don't have room to keep this in the dark. You're absolutely right. And I think what people are also going to find out that when we talk about the female body, those of you that don't have lived experience as a survivor of human trafficking, you do have lived experience, those of you that are women, of being a woman. And so what you're going to hear is not only the impact of the body for victims of human trafficking, but you're going to hear about the impact of the body, the impact that this has or can have on the female body. So based on that, can you tell us what are the effects and how can the human body tolerate the results of human trafficking?
Yeah, great question. You know, the female body, women, they're so resilient and adaptable. So we're able to grow and deliver forth from our body whole human beings, you know, into the world. We're able to experience trauma, have surgery, have things repaired, and then start again and repeat that all over. I mean, literally all of human existence is dependent on the restorative power of the female body. But in that power, your body is also communicating with you all the time. It's telling you when things are not right. It's telling you when something is harmful, dangerous, is hurting. It's telling you when something has been sick, damaged, infected. And so women, we have the ability to seek help, to get repaired, to get restored. In a human trafficking, a human sex trafficking sort of situation, you don't have the ability to listen to those signals. You don't have the agency over your own activities of what's being done to you. And so you don't get to heed those signals. You don't get to seek medical attention, and things get left untreated that can then lead to a lifetime of harm. And what we know is that victims of human trafficking are often asked over and over again to put themselves in harm's way. They are not at will to make decisions for themselves about what's done. We know that more money is often given to participate in unsafe practices. Agreed upon acts are not always what is stuck to. Foreign objects are used that you don't have any say in. And then non-consensual acts are often done. So it sort of puts women in a position where they don't even have the authority to listen to what their body is saying and to prevent that harm from being done. When injuries occur, then, you know, if you are being controlled and coerced, you may not have access to medical care. You may not have funding. Certainly, there's no reliable funding for health care for human sex traffic victims. And then even seeking care is traumatic and triggering. You know, women who are in charge of their whole lives, you know, grown-ups, have difficulty coming to the doctor and talking about these things and explaining these things to the doctor. So imagine if you're talking about a child that has been trafficked and injured. There's just not a lot of safe space there. And that's why this is so important to me as a physician, to really try to be a model of where a safe space can be. And what we know, like when you don't get care, then we're talking like serious impact on some of the most delicate, yet again, resilient parts of your body. So these will have a lifetime of consequences. When you are out of this life and you finally decide you want to start a family, you want to have, a life of your own making, then many women find that they are unable to start a family. That trauma, infections, scar tissue have rendered them infertile. There are also traumas that can lead to incontinence, so urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence. There's injuries that, when left untreated, can cause genital tract fistula formation. These are devastating, like lifelong problems that women will have to deal with. And remember, a lot of this is happening to them when they are children. There's even some cancers associated with sex trafficking. HPV in particular, the human papillomavirus, is a precursor to cancer. And so we're talking cervical cancer, rectal and anal cancer, oral pharyngeal cancers. This is, cancers that take decades to show themselves. And you're talking about a woman now dealing with a deadly cancer from something that was done to her as a child victim. So the ripple just continues to spread, and it's just really important that we sort of look at all the corners, look at the spectrum, and really get to work on what we can do to stop this.
Well, I'm just blown away by the fact that what you just said was that someone who was trafficked as a young teen, does the HPV virus can live in their system and then cause consequences that they had no idea about. And so therefore now when they are 40, 50, 60, those diseases that you talked about can manifest themselves. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, correct. And again, this is why trauma-informed care is so important. I mean, you're seeking care for a cancer with that sort of background. It really impacts sort of how you navigate the medical system and how we can best care for you. So it's really important to get this word out for medical professionals to know that oftentimes what we see, and we all see victims that have been trafficked, whether we know it or not, we all do, that we really sort of understand that this is happening to children. And where you get from a child to a 60-year-old woman who's dealing with cancer, that's a lot of trauma that has to be unpacked.
And what we know too is that there are some that enter into the life as children, but there's also those that enter into the life as adults as well. So I just want to add that to this scenario, but it's all bad regardless of when you enter it. And what makes it all bad and what impacts me the most by what you're saying, not being able to have the personal liberty that is needed in order to protect yourself when the body is crying out, I need help. And if you're under control, you're unable to go to the doctor. And then when you do go to the doctor, we need trauma-informed care so that doctor does not cast judgment, so that not only can that person be able to ask the questions that they need to ask in order to help themselves, but to ask the questions that could help protect them later on. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm loving the white coat.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to move on to Brenda Myers-Powell. And so, Brenda, based on what you just heard, you not only experiencing this on your own, but I know you have worked with hundreds of survivors.
Mhm.
have you seen on the ground, not only based on what she's saying, but what have you heard on the ground? What are some of the mental health consequences? You know what to do.
One
Do
of the things that one of the things that the doctor brought up is about all the different traumas that happen while not only while you're in human trafficking, but before you get into human trafficking. Remember, there's child trauma before you get into human trafficking. There's things that happen to you as a kid. There's child molestation. There's rapes and different things that happen to you before you even get into human trafficking that are happening to you as a child. These are things that you're getting that is happening to you as a child where you don't know where to place them. So you're putting them inside of you, in pockets inside of you, and they're sitting there. They're sitting there and they're fermenting inside of your body, and they come out in unavailable times, unimaginable times when you don't know what they are and how to feel about them. But these traumas are inside of you for all of your life. And some days you have events and reactions and moments where you're acting out and you don't even know why, but it's these traumas that are inside of you. And this makes you vulnerable for the 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 exploiters that are out there waiting for you. They know it. They know there's some things that are happening toward you because they can see it in your eyes and see it in the way you carry yourself. And it's just a way, you know what I'm saying? They see us as victims, and then you have all this stuff inside of you. It's your insecureness, it's your self-esteem, it's all of that. It's the way that you're labeled in your community as the girl not to mess with, the good kids don't mess with you. You're the bad girl. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to play with you, and you have to play with, those who are those people are using you, you get used as a kid. You get used as a kid around in the community because people have given you a label. So you're growing up with all this trauma, and this is in you before you even get to human trafficking. And now you pile in the human trafficking on it with the control, the beatings, the everything that you get, and you feel normal about this because you've been traumatized already, and this was part of your life to be knocked down and to these things to happen to you. So you accept them. I remember being told that I would never be accepted as a woman in marriage or to have a decent life because I wasn't qualified for that. I was told by my grandmother that as a little girl, and I didn't know why she would say something like that. I would never have a husband. She just told me that you would never have a husband. She said that to me because I didn't know how to cook and clean, and I didn't even understand stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? But I was told that I wasn't valuable, I wasn't beautiful, I wasn't anything. So these are things that I kept inside of me, and when people wanted to do things to me, I accepted them as a part of my life. So you have girls on the street that have been beat down so much before they got to the trafficking. The trafficking became something of a normalcy and accepting because, of course, when a trafficker gets you for the first part, they treat you good. And you're always trying to get back to that first part of being treated good, but you never get back there. But you're still trying to get back to that time when they treated you good because that was special to you and you want to be that special, but you never get back no matter what you do. So you get broken down and torn down again. And this affects you mentally. And it sits inside of you. And then the rest of your life, you're dealing with it. Your body is dealing with it. Your body shuts down when you don't want it to, sexually, mentally. But I have had girls' bodies who shut down sexually in their marriages, and they couldn't understand why it did. But because they had these issues in their mind, their body shut down and didn't want to have sex. You understand what I'm saying? I had a boyfriend that happened to me one time. He cheated on me and he made me real angry, and I could no longer, my body, because I had promised myself I would no longer have sex with anyone that didn't love me. And I felt he didn't love me, and I didn't know that my body was shut down. I was going to gynecologist thinking something was wrong with me. And it wasn't. My body was just shutting down. And I didn't know it could do that. But your body can do things. There's a lot of things that they don't teach you about human trafficking that can happen to you. And one of the things that Dr. Tracey was saying is part of it. We need to look at it and stop looking at ourselves as failures. We're not. It's the trauma that we've been through. I'd like to also talk about the part that we don't get funded to look into things like that. And when we go to doctors, even if we tell them, I've been trafficked, these things are happening to me, they still seem to resort back to treating me like just another patient, not considering that these things are happening to me. I have to remind my doctors all the time about my history. You know what I'm saying? But that's my job, to keep reminding them about my history so they can keep understanding what they need to look for. I keep going back to my doctors and they keep bringing up the fact that I have something in my blood that keeps coming up, and they keep kind of, I told you this before, it should be in the files, but they don't listen, and you've got to make them listen.
Yeah, I so agree.
This has to happen.
I, I so agree. And Brenda, man, everything you said was heartfelt. I know everybody is just listening to you and just hanging on to your very words. And I'm going to come back to you toward the end because I want you to talk about the changing policy also in Illinois.
Thank
So,
you, because we had an Congressman Jackson. He was so wonderful, and I definitely got to speak about that. Thank you so much.
absolutely. And you're so lucky to have him. Melanie, based on everything that you've heard, is there anything else that you would like to add that is pertinent to the Black community, especially in terms of policy, adultification, or anything that you think is really important?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we do not have enough time for all of the thoughts in my head. We can say so much about this issue. But, as was mentioned earlier, everything that we're hearing from Dr. Tracey, from Brenda, from Dr. Powell, this is not new for us in this community. And we can trace this all the way back to history, right? We know during the transatlantic slave trade, I don't think I need to go over how Black people were treated there. But then you have the fancy trade, right? Where women were specifically sold for the purposes of sexual access and concubinage. I can never say that word right. But these were the reasons that we were used from the beginning. And now if you fast forward, and that was in the 19th century, you fast forward to the last 50, 60 years or so, and you're seeing this increase of adultification in young Black girls and young Black boys. And what we were seeing is this idea, as was mentioned, that Black girls are older than what they are, that they're innately more mature. And unfortunately, we've seen this we've been treated differently in how we display our emotions, because Black children are exposed to more trauma at quicker and younger ages more than our other counterparts. We may express our fear as anger, or we may not have the necessary tools or access to the resources that can help us sift through some of those things. And as a result, we are seen as older than what we are. We are treated differently. We're put into the criminal justice system sooner. And when it comes to the medical field, we're thrown into this arena, and I'm sure Dr. Tracey can speak to that as well. We're thrown into these situations where we're too young to know how to advocate for ourselves, but have been deemed old enough and forced to have to figure out exactly what it is in order to be able to advocate for ourselves. So what ends up happening is, because we don't have the language, because we don't have the knowledge, we're put into these situations where we're misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all, or we get a diagnosis and we don't have the funds or the resources to be able to take care of it. We're dying at quicker rates and higher and faster rates. And we don't have the necessary support system if and when we are lucky enough to get a proper diagnosis or have the access to the resources that we may need. What we see now is, when we think about children that are sex trafficked, we see this parentification and this adultification of children. And what happens is, and I think Brenda started mentioning, the trauma that we go through as Black children in our own lives prior to our exploitation is already enough to have to sift through as you're growing from a child to an adult. And that's our own internal conflict as Black children. And now as adults or as young adults who have been exploited, on top of trying to sift through that internal conflict, what ends up happening is you have a 21-year-old Black child who is living in chaos mentally because they're still trying to sift through the internal conflict that they had when they were 6, 7, or 8.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate because we don't have the community support that we need. And yes, I would say over the last 100 years, we've made a lot of progress, specifically in the anti-trafficking field, of recognizing that Black individuals, have different experiences and that there are some things that need to be addressed specific to the Black community. We have made strides on that, but we're still a far, far away from understanding all of the nuances and complexities when it comes to Black individuals. I'm somebody who grew up in the foster care system, and unfortunately, Black children are disproportionately represented in the foster care system. I have experiences where I was trafficked in the foster care system by foster families. All of these connect somehow, some way back to this idea that Black children are to be adultified or parentified. And then when you're a ward of the state, or if you're a child in the system, then you have to deal with the lack of medical resources or the lack of access to certain things. So, I can go on and on about all of the different ways that this touches, but it really comes down to this core that Black children and Black individuals have a different experience from childhood. I won't say from birth, but from childhood. Our experiences are innately different, and our society culturally has treated us different from the very beginning, almost from our inception. That has translated throughout history. That is translated to the way that we're treated as sex trafficked victims, now seen as criminals, or, as adult survivors 10 years too early. And then that translates into current present day, the kind of medical attention that we get, or the medical attention that we can afford, the education that we're receiving around this issue, the support that we receive, whether or not we have a record or not. There's all of these different avenues that may not seem interconnected, are very much interconnected because of our race, because of the fact that we are Black individuals who have experienced this. So being Black in and of itself is already a world that we have to fight. Adding sex trafficking onto that only adds to the complexity, which is why it is so important that we continue to have a conversation that highlights the effects of sex trafficking on the Black community specifically.
Man, what did I tell you? I told you she was going to hit it out the park, and you did. And unfortunately, one of the other consequences to adultification is that those children don't get the nurturing that they need, right? Because they're seen as adults. Moving on to you, Audrey. Let's talk about what are some of the core elements of best policy solutions to the harm caused by commercial sex. You're on mute.
Okay. First of all, I'm full of emotion. I'm this Black woman that is digesting this information. Dr. Tracey, I'm one of the survivors who to date had to end up getting engaged to myself because of the disassociation. Brenda, you touched on it. From being in the life where my body doesn't know the difference between someone I love or someone who gave me money, right? And so I had to come to a place as a Black woman who was brought into the commercial sex industry as a teenager, right? And I had to kind of come out of denial around that and just like, I don't want to have to pretend anymore, because as a young Black person, I've always had to pretend that I was something that I was not, right? And so to come out of denial, and it's okay, and to take care of myself. And for me, the self-care is staying out of relationships, because I don't even think it's fair to bring that on to another human being, right? But then I think about, when I think about Black girls and Black women and being exploited, even in that we're offered less money, right? So even when you look at like our bodies from the beginning, we're taught your body is not as valuable as that white girl's body, right? You witness, right? So the whole thing from growing up and what happened in our childhoods to even what you witness in the life is, again, another hammer into your esteem and your self-worth, right? So, I just need to say that, in Boston, we have an Emma coalition, and we were working on trying to get this bill passed, a Sex Trade Survivors Act, where the buyers and the exploiters will be held accountable and charged, but not the folks that are in the life. And we tried a few times, weren't able to get that passed. So we kind of took a step back this year and decided, okay, let's kind of back up. And now what we're looking at is our bill to kind of like clean up quarries, right? Because that's important too, right? Opening making a way for, and particularly Black and brown people. And I said this earlier, the only reason why I do policy work is my advocacy for Black and brown people. If it was not about what happens to Black and brown children, I'd still do this work because I care about children, but I wouldn't get as deep into policy. But anytime I'm talking about policy and fighting, because it's the Black and brown girls who have these horrendous records, right? Right? It's hard for us to get jobs anyway, right? And so I'm always kicking and screaming. But I feel like one of the things that I realize is that in that coalition, the Black survivors are giving the white survivors permission to stand up for us. Speak up, you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes the white people might not hear you unless the white person says it. You know what I'm saying? And so in our coalition, we're like, listen, when you're speaking, we're giving you permission. Because I know sometimes white people, you feel like, oh, I might be out of line. No, listen, instead of using white privilege to intimidate people, right? Or using that white privilege for something that's not healthy, there's a way to use white privilege in a healthy way, right? To advocate for Black and brown girls. People have advocated for Amber Alerts, right? Yeah, we need Amber Alerts, right? Kids have been found. But what I see in my life and my experience is that everything that's usually done for our kids is never really focused on Black and brown children, right? These things like the Amber Alert, there's these things because of white children, because they lived in they had a 2-parent home. They were snatched out of their room, but the Black child is a runaway, right? And so we have to stop that. We have to also, what I'm noticing is we have to come together, survivor-led agencies in your communities, come together, survivors and allies, and work on trying to get some bills passed, because we're working hard to get this on the Sex Trade Survivors Act to clear up those quarries and those things that are in the way, right? Because you could be out of life for 5 years and you go to have a better life. You get healthy and want to go to school and do some things, and those things slap you in the face. The other thing that I find making sure, I find that in this movement to date, that we will focus on the issues of non-Black folks. Everybody wants, you know what I'm saying? And when we still struggle, right? And I want to say this, some of us come into this with, like, I have invisible disabilities. You understand what I'm saying? That you might not see. So I'm saying, even for Black and brown children that are being sold, women who have come out, like, we come from some stuff, and it's insulting when we come from a place, and then when we speak up or say something that harms someone that's not of color, that needs to be corrected immediately. When the fight is still on for our Black and brown children, they have become invisible, and they're not being reported missing in the way of which they should. And so I'm angry because I am angry, and I'm going through a process. And I'm still going to fight for my Black and brown children. I'm going to fight for my Black and brown women, the survivors who are doing this work. And we need to come together, Black survivors as well, to demand the same respect, the same pay as the non-white survivors that are in this movement, because it is still distorted around our children and for Black and brown women who are doing this work. So I just need to say that.
Audrey, you've been talking about this for several years now. And you're absolutely right. And I know it's probably hard for some to hear, but it is the truth. But the one thing I want to point out that you said at the beginning, that so many people have been brought into this life that they did not choose. And so what you guys are seeing is the consequences of that with these three dynamic women. And it's not just them. This is so common. One of the things that I think is important, and we're going to talk about next, about the call to action. One of the call to action is that our Black civil rights organizations, such as NAACP, understand the advocates, the survivors. We need your help. Another thing, and I'm going to give a shout out right now to the Divine Nine. And those that are on this call know who the Divine Nine are. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So is Tracey. And so Divine Nine, we need you. Links, we need you. Black organizations, we need you. Academics, we need for you to get out there and research. When you look at the research, you'll notice that it's for a specific time span, usually around 2014, maybe up to 2020. We need current research, because that's what helps us to get out the right information. It's what helps nonprofits to get grants. Law enforcement, we need you in this fight as well. And so as a result, I think it's important for you to get the proper training. Dr. Tracey, what do you see?
I agree, and I would say my call to action is for my medical colleagues, for those in the healthcare sector, to educate yourself, take time to get those CMEs to recognize victims of trafficking, and then to have a plan of how to deal with them with resources for support and ongoing care.
Perfect. Brenda, what do you?
Two call to actions. The one is for the call to action for decrim, for partial decrim, which we're talking about in Illinois. We're fighting that right now, and we have full decrim and partial decrim, and we're standing, as all of us here are standing on partial decrim, which has the same thing where our survivor model, which is where survivors get services, and we stand with the buyers and the other people involved in it to get arrested. We do not want full decrim where they can open up brothels and have the same effect as, the marijuana places. They'll be on every block, and no one will get arrested or have any type of consequences from it. And the other thing that I have a call to action on is missing and murdered Black women. Missing and murdered Black women. This has to stop. This is all that we're talking about right now. This was a call to action of it. You know, they're looking over the fact that we're trafficked and now we're missing and murdered. And this has to stop. But please, those two call to actions are very important to us. And you can call us at Rights for Girls and get in contact with us because we're following through that here in Illinois, and we're fighting that right now. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Just know that we are here and we ain't going nowhere.
Melanie.
In the words of my Black mother, I'm going to say, put your money where your mouth is. I think there's so many ways that you can support Black individuals that are in this fight. There's all of us advocates that are on this call, but we have access to so many more that can bring trainings to your area. I know there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to about the foster care system, the child welfare system, the medical field. We have access to that information, support organizations that are led by Black survivors, or that work directly with this population, in addition to what everybody else has said so far. And I would absolutely say to try to prioritize folks that are, prioritize survivors who have that lived experience within the population of the folks you're trying to work with. And that includes in the medical field, educational, or in the legislative space.
Thank you, Mel. I'm just going to say real quick, call to action. Black folks, get in touch with your legislators, your Black leaders in your communities, your churches, your Black doctors, people who have connections to have, so they can really advocate and scream loud, right? So that we can change policy, so that folks will know that Black and brown children matter. And for the survivors that are on the call, white survivors, stand up for us, right? When you know we're being paid less or treated, say something. It's not going to affect your pay, right? Make sure, and if you run an organization and you're serving a lot of Black and brown people, hire some Black staff. You cannot serve a culture in a community. If you're in a community, a Black and brown community, and most of your staff is white, you're doing a disservice to that community. Not taking away from your good work, but you have to have Black and brown people in your organization, because we're the ones who are going to keep this up front. I'm going to keep yelling and screaming for my Black children, and just for Black and brown women in this movement as a whole. And anyone going missing should get the same attention and media attention as anyone else. In this movement, everyone should be treated equal.
Yeah, I thank you so very much. And in my closing remarks, I just want to say that I think we understand that all survivors, right, do experience the traumas that we talked about today. So again, that does not negate that. However, when you look at the numbers, though, of what group is significantly and disproportionately affected by this, and sometimes there's this feeling that it's not only a feeling of that we're invisible in terms of those that are fighting it, but we put this together so that the Black community can really understand and get behind this, because it does greatly affect them. And I'm going to give you a quote. And this quote is from Wilbur Wilberforce. And he made this quote as he observed slavery. He said, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you did not know." I, Dr. Stephany Powell, would like to say to you on this call that today you cannot ever say that you did not know. And so now that you know, we need for you to join this in this fight, because we can't stay invisible. And so I would like to thank our incredible panelists, our sponsors, the team who helped coordinate and spread the word about this event, Deborah Joyner, yes, Constaneta Fitzpatrick, Deasia Wiggins, Eleanor Gaetan, and Megan Griffin. Thank you guys so much. I know for some of this may have been a hard conversation, but imagine how hard it is for those that have experienced it. Thank you so much for being with us today.